Yo, what's going on, kings and queens? It's your boy Chaz Jackson coming back to you once again, representing GNG, gifting the gift. Hey, just want to take the time to tell you thank you for giving me your eyes and your ears once again as we go to dive deep into some inspiration that I pray will plant like a seed in your mind and assist you in becoming a greater version of yourselves. And as you've been tuning in on this weekly live stream podcast, you know that our motto is we're all gifted differently to make a difference. I truly believe that, and I know there's a bunch of difference makers that's going to be looking at this powerhouse speech that we're about to do with my man here. And I want you guys to go ahead and drop your comments, share this out to anyone that you feel will be able to resonate with this series as we continue. Get your pen and paper. I have a champion that's about to bring some nuggets, some wisdom, some value that's going to just be life-changing. I truly believe that. And as you know, our series, Summer Soldiers, where our theme on this series is that we're equipping young black males on their journey through the battlefield of injustice. And I got my man here, Joel Hawbaker. Phenomenal guy. I want to read off this short bio, but before I do, I want to express the mission of this platform. And I'm sure if you're new to this is what we're all about here, is providing tips and techniques for young men as they go on their journey of improving their personal growth. And I challenge young men, I challenge myself, I also challenge you, viewer, whether you listen to this live or you're listening to the replay or on the podcast, to become a passionate visionary who is determined to leave a legacy for themselves by adopting unwavering life values and serving others in the area of gifting led by God. And again, I have a difference maker here. Joel is a blended family coach and award-winning high school teacher. He's an Amazon #1 best-selling author, professional speaker, and frequent podcast guest who loves helping blended step families overcome obstacles and grow by teaching them the 10 commandments of blended family life. These are universal principles that families can apply immediately to begin seeing positive change. Are you ready, champion? You are live on GNG live stream podcast. You ready to get it going?
I'm ready. Thank you. That's a heck of an introduction. It's going to be, I'm looking forward to trying to live up to that. Thank you.
Yeah. And I know I said something brief. Is there anything else you want to add to that short intro that we just expressed?
Yeah. Well, so the reason that I work with blended families is because I've been in one for most of my life. I know you and I talked about this some before, but just so your audience knows, part of the reason I'm so passionate about blended families is because of my background in education. I've been a teacher for about to start year 15 next month, so that's pretty exciting. But I also grew up in one. My parents divorced when I was in middle school, and about a year after they split up, my mom started dating my stepdad. Even though they never married, I call him my stepdad. And then as an adult, I'm divorced and remarried with 2 kids from my first marriage. And so I've lived in a blended family as a kid, and I'm part of a blended family as an adult with kids. So I've seen it from both directions. And, I'm blessed to have had a wonderful example of how it can go well. And so that's part of where my passion comes from for trying to help other blended families who may be struggling, or maybe they just don't know best practices. They're just not sure how to go about it because maybe they didn't have that good example. Maybe they grew up in a blended family and it didn't go well, or maybe they've just haven't ever been around a good blended family, don't know what to do. And so that's where my passion comes from. I love trying to help people learn how to live more cooperatively and positively together. And I want to say this too. I love what you said right at the beginning about this whole show, that we are all gifted differently in order to make a difference. I wish I could just emblazon that on my classroom wall, because in classrooms, kids are like, well, they're the smart kid and I'm the athletic kid who's kind of stupid and I'm the nerdy kid. No, whatever your gift is that's a good thing. I don't care. We're not labeling kids smart and stupid. That's the old educational model. We are all smart in different ways. Let's find yours and let's utilize it. So I love that you're sharing that message, man. That's awesome.
I truly appreciate that. And thank you for going a little bit deeper on what you do and what you're about. I know I was really attracted to you from what your focus is, blended families. And I know there is a young male that's looking at this that's in a blended family right now. So I felt like you would be awesome for this audience. And just starting out, what do you think about what's going on in our country right now, Joel?
So I'm a history teacher, and that's what I studied in college. And I think a lot of things about what's going on. I would say at its core, I'm concerned because I feel like our country is as divided as it has been in the past probably 50 or 60 years. Like in studying history, I can't remember a time where the country was this divided, probably since Vietnam. My dad was a Vietnam vet. He spent 18 months getting shot at over in Vietnam. And so that's something that I've studied a pretty good bit. And just not just the politics, but society in general, this level of upheaval is something that isn't usual. This hasn't really happened for probably a generation and a half or two generations. And so on the one hand, it makes me very, very nervous just because anytime society is in upheaval, like people get nervous. On the other hand, and this may sound weird, I'm very hopeful because if as a country we can figure out how to turn all of these things that are causing upheaval into progress, we can make our country better than it's ever been, right? So let me give you a brief example of why I feel that way. One of my all-time favorite books is called Mere Christianity, right, by C.S. Lewis. I love that book. I quote it all the time. There's a passage in that book where he talks about how people are capable of either great things or terrible things. And he compares people to other things. He says, listen, a cow isn't really good or bad, right? Because cows don't have that much brain power. They're just sort of there. Dogs are both better or worse than cows. Children are smarter than dogs, so they're better or worse than, animals. And then adults are even more that. So as human beings, we could be great. We also have great capacity to be awful. And right now, unfortunately, it seems like a lot of people from across the spectrum, because it's not any one group or one side, like it seems like a lot of people are just giving vent to their anger and frustration. And some of it's completely legitimate, and some of it's just anger and frustration. But the problem is, what we need to do is figure out how to say, okay, what are the legitimate issues? And let's fix those so that our country can be stronger than it's ever been. So at the same time, I'm both nervous and I'm hopeful because I think there is a way forward if we can learn how to talk to each other differently. If we can learn how to respectfully communicate again, I think that will go a long way. And obviously, that's something I talk a lot about as a blended family coach because unfortunately, one of the biggest problems in blended families is that the adults that were together and aren't anymore, they don't communicate well. And as a result of that, the entire family suffers. Well, I think that's what we're seeing in society at large right now, is we have groups of people who have completely legitimate messages that aren't being heard by other people for a lot of different reasons. And so what it turns into is a bunch of name calling, and then nobody learns anything. I mean, if you've got kids, you've seen kids have an argument, and once people just start calling names, you're not learning anything. You're not fixing anything. I mean, when you see little kids in preschool calling each other duty head, that's not solving an argument. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and that's what we have now is we have adults doing the equivalent of calling each other duty heads. Like, that's ridiculous. We got to start talking to each other like we're actually being respectful of other human beings. If we can do that, I'm very hopeful. If we can't do that, it makes me even more nervous. So that's
gold. That's gold. That's gold. And I really like, and you're really diving into relationships, building relationships, and what's going on with COVID-19, with the police brutality. I mean, we can draw the line and plug in the names, the events.
Yep.
I mean, there's so much frustration, sadness, like you mentioned, depression, anger. And to be honest, for me, I'm angry, and
with good reason.
And there's that thing, like I mentioned this in a previous episode, is there's a lion and there's a sheep inside of me.
Yeah.
And me being a man of faith myself, I choose to allow the sheep part of me to come forward. And that lion, he's angry. He's in that cage. But how can we bring that sheep forward? And I feel like it's like what me and you are doing, Joe. We're having a conversation, and there's not a lot of conversations going on to create solutions. And that's one of the key points of this series, this platform, is to create sound solutions that will help create authentic relationships, right? To be able to figure out how we can move forward with this. And I know you teach kids how to develop better relationships. So I know you're a teacher. Let's just take that scenario. You've been back in your classroom and you're wanting to build a relationship. So encourage your kids to build relationships.
Yep.
Can you provide some tips and techniques on how that normally works for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate that, because the thing is, right now, I think what everybody needs to do, but especially people like myself, what we need to do is we need to be listening a lot more than we are speaking. So again, just so your audience knows, I'm a white guy in Alabama. That's about as far from experiencing racism as you're going to find, right? And I teach at a small private Christian school where the demographics are about 80% white, 20% minorities. Okay, so that means that's what the makeup is in my classroom. Well, what that means is, one, I've never experienced racism living in Alabama, right? Not directly. My stepdad is an African American, and so I saw it sometimes secondhand, because in the 90s, when he and my mom would go out to dinner together, I didn't understand why they got funny looks. It wasn't until later that I realized that in the 90s, interracial dating was still kind of taboo down here. I had no idea. And I wouldn't have ever seen that without going out with my stepdad sometimes, because people would look at him. He's a big, like, he used to be a bodybuilder, football player. He's a big dude. I'm 5'3".
Ronnie Coleman.
People would look at him and they would look at me and look at my mom and go, oh, right. But here's the thing. So I've never experienced what a lot of people have. So that means what I need to do is just ask questions, and I need to listen. And instead of arguing about the answers, I just need to go, all right, I appreciate you sharing that. That's good to know, because I wouldn't know that because I've never been through it. Right. So I know we talked before about a conversation I had with one of my former students a couple days ago. African-American kid, incredibly intelligent. He's on scholarship at Stanford University now. He graduated a few years ago, and so I called him up because he's one of the smartest kids I ever taught, and we talked for 2 hours. And mostly it was me asking him questions and going, okay, so what do you think about this? What do you think about if I'm trying to teach this in my classroom this fall? How should I handle some of that stuff? And he gave me some great ideas. So one of the big things we're going to do this fall, because I'll be teaching middle school civics to like 12 and 13 and 14-year-olds, right? That's one of the things I'll be teaching. And so the question is, how do I teach kids how to have good conversations? And that's going to be a big part of it. Is, one, you need to treat people with respect. And that includes not just what you say, but how you say it. Because we all know you can say something and mean completely the opposite. I said something to my wife yesterday, and she stopped and looked at me. She said, that sounds not like what you actually meant by those words. Like, your tone of voice did not match your. It's like when you got a little kid and you force them to say I'm sorry to their sibling, and they go, I'm sorry. Like, no, you're not.
Yeah.
You're not sorry. My daughters did that all the time. I'm sorry. No, you're not. You got to say it like you mean it, right? Well, that's one of the big things we got to teach people, is how to say things respectfully and sincerely, even if we're going to disagree. And again, if we can start that with 12-year-olds, imagine how much better off they'll be when these kids are 18-year-olds going to college or into the military or into the workforce, knowing how to handle situations like that. Because let's be honest, if you look at culture today, the examples that our children and students are seeing about how to have conversations are terrible examples. I don't care what news channel you watch. I don't care what your political affiliation is. I don't want to get into any of that. What I know is, if you see it on TV, it's probably a terrible example of how to have an adult conversation. So we've got to do better.
Yeah, most definitely. I know you said the television is like, it's built to promote more negativity. Let's just be honest. It's just it's built to kind of keep you in this state of where you're not having a fruitful, conversation, fruitful outcome. So yeah, that's really good what you just shared there, for sure. Yeah, go ahead.
And it's sad. I'm glad you mentioned that, because you're exactly right. That and I give kids this example in the classroom. I say, listen, the hard thing about it is we actually like other people suffering. Right. The term for that in psychology is Schadenfreude. I think that's how you pronounce it. It's like a German word that means rejoicing in the suffering of others. And so I explain that to kids, and I tell them, here's what I mean. If you see a Boy Scout help an old lady across the road, nobody cares. It's never going to show up in the newspaper. Nobody gives a crap. But if that same Boy Scout shoves the old lady in front of a bus, that's front page news, right? And
Right.
it's because we're sinful, broken people. We like stuff that makes us angry. And I tell people too, my history students know this. If you ask any kid I've ever taught, I guarantee they can answer one question correctly, even if they don't remember anything else from class. Here's what it is. What unites people more than anything else in the world? And the answer is a common enemy.
Mm.
And so news plays on that by trying to make whatever their version of the enemy is bigger. And so, and that's true. Like every dictator in history has known that. That's how dictators come to power, is they play on whoever the common enemy is and they make them the scapegoat, right? And that's what we're seeing from everybody in the news. Again, it's not just one side, it's both sides are trying to make the other people out. It's not just that other people are misinformed. No, it's that they're evil or stupid or both. There's no way that we could possibly respect them because they're that stupid and evil. And so we just have to treat them like the enemy. That's the message we're getting from the news. And that's terrible, because there's no way our country can function like this long term. There's just no way. And so we've got to learn how to have constructive conversations again.
Yeah, most definitely. I truly believe like your life is a reflection of the stories that you tell yourself. So what are you
Oh, I
telling
love
yourself?
that. That's good.
Like, what are you telling yourself based off of what you see on social media, the news? What are you accepting as truth? And you hit on the money. It's about education, us being ignorant to the whole situation. You can look at one part or one person that you're following and you will take everything they're saying to heart without even doing the research. And that's where that kind of goes back to the relationship. In order for you to build an authentic relationship, I have to get to know Joel. Joel has to get to know Chaz. You have to know my background. Where am I coming from? Because, you're not going to get the full picture of my story if you just stay superficial, if that makes sense.
That's right. And if I make assumptions.
Yeah. Oh, you hit it right on the money. Assumptions is so big, and we do it so much. I catch myself doing it every day, and that goes into stereotyping and that just kind of opens up a whole bunch of unnecessary loss of energy, if that makes sense.
So. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So a couple things you mentioned that brought things to mind. One is you mentioned the importance of education. I 100% agree. And not just formal education, but just how to be a good human being. Like for me, that's what education should be about. It's not about getting a good job or a good paycheck or a scholarship. Education is about helping you become a better human being, which means treating other people better. So education needs to be about values. And the other thing is that it's learned behavior, especially when you look at things like, and this is kind of keeping with the theme of your show and stuff right now, racism is learned behavior. Nobody is born racist, right? You learn that behavior, and it's not normally something someone sits down and teaches you, but it is something that you just pick up. Because again, I grew up in Alabama. I would love to say that I never saw racism, but that would be bullcrap, right? I grew up in Alabama. I had the school I grew up going to, I think there were 3 black kids in a class of 40. And I can remember going to school and seeing people treat those 3 students differently. And I didn't understand why, because that's not the way we were raised, right? But that was the way other people were raised. And it was one of those things that, again, I didn't get it until I was probably in late elementary, early middle school, when I realized, wow, the reason you're treating David differently is because he has darker skin than you. Are you serious with that? Like, he's got an African-American dad and a white mom, and therefore you treat him like he's less than you? Are you kidding me? Like, that didn't make any sense in my brain, because that wasn't how my mom and dad, and then my stepdad, obviously, like, that's not how we were raised. Right. And so then when I had kids, the question became, how do we make sure that we are raising them to treat people as people, regardless of the superficial stuff? Right. And so I had just one example that comes to mind, and it just makes me smile to look back on. So I've got 2 daughters who are now 16 and 13. And sometimes I'm very glad, and sometimes I wish they were still little babies. Yeah. But
I got my 2 young girls too. I couldn't imagine them being that age.
Yeah,
they're about to be 2 and 5 coming up soon. That was crazy.
Enjoy that, because the thing is, every age is enjoyable for different reasons. But the enjoyment at 2 and 5 is different than the enjoyment at 16 and 13, right? So there are days when I wish they were still little. But when they were little, one of our friends gave us a giant dollhouse. I got really good at playing dollhouse and tea party and princess, and like I got good at those things when I had 2 daughters. I mean, you
Oh
learn how
yeah,
to
I'm
do the
right there
girl
with
stuff.
you,
Like,
man. I
so be
understand.
it. Okay. So a friend of ours gave us this dollhouse. And it was beautiful. It was like 3 feet tall. It opened up where it had all the little pieces of furniture, and it came with a whole family of dolls with it, right? Okay, great. Well, the kids played with this dollhouse for 2 or 3 years. And at one point, my daughter brought me one of the little baby dolls. She was playing with the dollhouse. She brought it into the next room where I was. And she said, Dad, look at this beautiful baby. Look how cute she is. Now, what our girls didn't really pay attention to is the fact that the dolls that came with the dollhouse were black dolls. There was a black family, right? And so when she brought me the baby, what she didn't say was, Dad, look at this cute black baby. She just said, look at this cute baby, because
Right.
she hadn't been taught, oh, you identify people by their skin color first. She hadn't
Right.
been taught that. That's not something we wanted to teach our kids, right? We just taught them people are people are people. It's not that you don't see the color. It's that that's not what you should latch on to. You know what I mean? And
Right.
so that was something that I've always it's an example I tell my students, because it may not seem like a big deal, but the reality is that racism is learned behavior. And that means if it's been learned, the good news is it can be unlearned, or it can at least be stopped from being passed on to the next generation, right? By
Mm,
re-education. And so that's one of the big conversations we have in the classroom as well. Because again, I teach at a mostly white private Christian school in not big city Alabama. It's pretty the town I live in is about 30,000 people. The town I teach in is about 70,000 people. So
how
we're not
far is it
talking big.
like from Crimson Tide, like Alabama University? How far is it? Is that about
I think
far?
about 2 hours, hour and a half, 2 hours north. Yeah, they're south of me by about that far. And so the thing is, we still get a lot of kids that come to our school who have worn Confederate flag belt buckles, or they've got a Confederate bumper sticker on their redneck pickup truck. And it's one of those things where it's like, listen, I understand you don't see it the same way that some of your classmates do. But if we're talking about Christian love and trying to show other people that we love them, if we know it bothers them, then just don't do it. I don't care if it really is innocent. Whether it is or not, it's a great argument to have. But the thing is, if you know it bothers them, maybe just don't do that. And that, again, that's a conversation that we need to have in the classroom, because it's important for the white kids to understand, even if you don't mean anything by it, you are sending a message, whether you mean to or not. And that's a message that I promise you don't want to be sending.
Right.
And they've
Right.
been, because a lot of them don't know it. Again, a lot of them have just grown up as kids in the South, and that's just what you do. You have Confederate flag belt buckles, and you have bumper stickers on your truck or whatever. And so again, part of it is just helping open their eyes to the fact that even if you don't mean for it to, here's the message you're sending.
Right. Right. And like you, and even going back to where we originally was talking about at the beginning of that notion there, is educating ourselves.
Yeah.
So me feeling obligated to, with Joel, if you have questions, to answering those questions. Well, Chaz, why are you angry about it? Well, Joel, this goes back 400 years ago.
Right.
Let's talk about at the beginning of slavery, and really kind of go through, the mechanics of that, and really, like you said, open the eyes, and then be like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
so now I see why I shouldn't say that based off of what happened.
Right.
So in the past, and what's
Right.
happening right now. And I know I kind of shared with you kind of off camera of, something that my pastor said about, what if you had your two
Mm-hmm.
kids and one of them was
Yep.
hurt, you know, you're going to spend more time with that hurt kid, not saying that you don't love the other kid, or not saying that,
Right.
whatever your opinions is invalid, but you really have to consider and practice that empathy at that moment, and really
Mm-hmm.
be concerned about that one individual and how that hurt them, or, using that scenario or
Yeah.
that analogy to kind of paint a picture of,
Right.
really looking into, or what really happened to that kid that got
Yeah.
hurt. Why they're
Yeah. No.
acting that way.
Yep. Yep.
And really thinking, speaking, and acting in the intentional way to
Yeah.
understand that. So I truly believe
Yeah.
that's key. And I know I was listening to one of your interviews, and you had kind of quoted from your book.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you got a couple out there, right? You got a couple books, a
Yeah.
couple.
I got an ebook and a regular book. Yeah.
Right. But you had said in one of the interviews, the smaller your audience, the more important your leadership. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I felt that was powerful. Like, so you
Thank you.
have that young black male right now that's looking at you right now, and obviously, not unless they're a movie star or whatnot, they have a very small audience, right?
Mhm.
They have, a certain amount of people in their environment that there's
Mhm.
impacting. So
Right.
going on with everything that's kind of going on right now at this present time, what tips and techniques
Mhm.
can you give in order for us to equip to be a leader to your small audience or wherever individuals God placed in their path?
Yeah. So first of all, thank you. I didn't. I'm flattered that you checked out some of those interviews and read some of my book. I appreciate that. Like, that's pretty cool. That's just fun. Anytime people do that, so I appreciate you checking those out. But I would say a couple things. One, what I mean by that, when your audience is small, the bigger impact you can have is that you can form these deep, authentic relationships, like you're talking about. So for me, like, I have my family. So I have a wife and I've got 2 kids, and I have probably 75 kids I'll teach this school year, and I've got 20 kids on a soccer team. Well, of those groups, my 2 kids, my 75 students, or my 18 soccer players, I'm going to have the most impact on my 2 kids because the time that I spend with them is a lot more focused. So what I mean is, in order to become a leader, there's a few things that you've got to concentrate on. And one, the biggest part of being a leader to me is helping make the other people around you into the best versions of themselves that they can be. So that means you have to get to know them really well, right? So if I'm talking with students in my classroom, one of the first things I have them do every semester is to write a page essay telling me, what do I need to know about you that's going to help me understand you better? So, for example, I had a kid a couple years ago. The school I teach at, by the way, is associated with it's called the Big Oak Boys and Girls Ranch. It's a kind of a second chance home for a lot of kids who have been abused or abandoned or things like that. And so a lot of the kids that come from the ranch, I mean, they're of all kinds of backgrounds and races, right? The one thing they have in common is pretty severe trauma of some kind, right? And so in a classroom, I've got 15 kids or 20 kids. At any given time, about 20% of those kids come from that trauma kind of background. So I might have like a completely really rich doctor's kid sitting right next to a kid that had nothing literally 2 weeks ago. Well, I need to know their stories in order to help them grow, because I can't treat those 2 kids the exact same way. Because if they're acting out in class, they're probably doing it for very different reasons, right?
Right.
And so that's something I need to understand. So, for example, one of the kids a couple years ago, I don't want to mention his name just in case he's watching this, but he's a great kid. He was a great athlete, and he was normally very respectful and pretty kind. He was a teenage boy, so he's kind of goofy like we all were, but he's a good kid. And one day, he just was being terrible. He was mouthing off and being rude to his classmates and being disrespectful to me. And I called him in the hallway, and he was one of the kids from the ranch. And I called him in the hallway, and I said, "What's going on today? This isn't you." And he said, "Coach, listen, I haven't seen my dad in about 3 years, and I just got word that he passed away yesterday."
Wow.
I can't imagine that child's life. My dad was my hero, and I had him until I was 25. And even after he and my mom split up, I got to see him almost every day till I went to college. I can't imagine what it's like to be a 16-year-old kid who hasn't seen your father in years, and you just found out that he died. Like, are you kidding?
Right.
How on earth? So in that moment, what I need to do is just say, "Brother, I'm sorry, and I'll be praying for you. And if you want to talk about it, we'll stand out here in the hallway and talk the rest of class. You come back by after class and we'll talk again. If you don't want to talk about it, just know that I'm here for you." But like, if I don't know that about that kid, the way that I treat him is going to be different. If I just assume he's acting up because he's a jerk kid, all I'm doing is adding to his hurt and making an enemy out of someone I don't want to make an enemy out of. So the biggest thing we can do as leaders is get to know our audience better to find out how we can best help them. And that involves a lot of listening, and it involves active listening. Not just listening to try to respond or argue, but listening to really try to I'm trying to remember, I think it was Stephen Covey in his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He said one of the chapter titles was "Seek first to understand, then to be understood." I need to know where people are coming from. Yeah, I need to know where people are coming from so that I can understand them. That way, I can help my message to them be understood better. If I know where you're coming from, I can make sure that you're going to hear what I have to say. Does that make sense? But I
That
need to
makes
understand
sense.
you first.
That makes sense. That makes sense. You're on fire. I hope you got that pen and paper. He's dropping jewels right now, for sure. That's really good stuff. That's really good stuff. And even kind of going off of the branch of that, how important for that young man to be a leader? How important is family support? I know you're a blended family coach, and you see. I'm sure you've had a lot of different conversations with a lot of different families from a lot of different
Yeah.
backgrounds. So how important is that family support for a young man?
Yeah, it's huge. It's huge. And the thing is, yeah, every blended family is unique. Every blended family has its own kind of dynamics and their own situation of mom and dad or stepmom or stepdad or whatever it may be, and kids from like we got some friends that we were just hanging out with a couple of days ago, and they've got I think 6 or 7 kids, and they're his and hers and theirs together because the mom in the family is a widow. Her first husband passed away, but they had like 3 kids together. The husband in the family is divorced and remarried. He had 1 or 2 kids, and then together they've got 1 or 2. So that's a very unique kind of a blend, right? Well,
Right.
whatever your family dynamic is, the biggest thing, and again, you and I talked about this before, what people a lot of times forget is that children learn a lot more by watching than they do by listening. I mean, think back to your own childhood. How much do you actually remember about all the lectures your parents gave you?
Not a ton. But you all remember
Right.
what they do, right? You always.
That's right. But you remember how they treated people. You remember how they treated you. You remember how they treated strangers. You remember how they treated someone homeless on the street that was asking them for money, right? Those kind of events stick in our head. And again, that's one of those things I'm really thankful for. Like I had a great example in my dad and my mom and my stepdad because they were kind and respectful to everybody. Like I wish I could be as kind and respectful to people as my dad and my stepdad and my mom were. I'm just not. I need to be, but I know that I'm not. And so that family structure is huge. Whether you're in a traditional nuclear family, whether you're in a blended family, whether you're not married, but you're in a co-parent, like a single parenting situation, because I've been there too after I was divorced and before I was remarried, like those are hard. But the bottom line is kids need to see good adult examples in order for them to learn how to become good adults. So with my blended family teaching, or coaching, there's 2 big pillars that everything is based on. I just did an event recently called our 10 Commandments of Blended Family Life online conference. But in the Old Testament, God gave us 10 commandments.
Right.
And in the New Testament, Jesus kind of summarized those in 2 commandments. They said, what's the greatest commandment? He said, well, there's 2. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, all your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. These encompass all the law and the prophets. Well, same idea here. There are 10 commandments of blended family life that I've come up with, but really you can boil them down to 2 things, right? It's very simple. Here they are. 1, be the adult you want your kids to become. If we could just do that, that would be huge. That'd be huge. And I'm not throwing stones because I could pick out specific actions that my daughters do that I don't like, that I 100% know they learn by watching me. And that's not something I'm proud of because it means that I've already failed them in some ways. But that's the biggest part. 1, be the adult you want your kids to become. If you want your kid to be respectful, kind, if you want them to be people of integrity, right, then you need to be that. So that's the first one. And the second one is very simple. This goes back to what we all learned in kindergarten. Remember the golden rule. Treat people the way that you want to be treated. Don't treat them how you think they deserve based on what you think about them. Don't treat them badly if they treated you badly. Treat them the way you would want to be treated. If adults could remember those 2 rules, our entire society, the entire world would be different, right? And again, I'll be the first to admit that I fail every day. There are some days that I just don't treat my wife the way that I should. There's some days I don't treat my kids or my students or my soccer players the way that I should. So then the question becomes, when we screw up, what do you do? And again, as a believer, you and I know, like what you do is you go back and you apologize and you ask forgiveness and you try to make it right. You try to make restitution. You try to, whatever it is. If I've broken the relationship, I need to fix it. Now, Chaz, if I've wronged you and I come to you and I say, Chaz, listen, I know what I did. I'm really sorry. I need to ask you to please forgive me. If you look at me and say, nope, that's okay, because I've done all I can do, right? The rest is up to you and your heart. If you come to me and do the same thing, you say, Joel, listen, I need your forgiveness. And I say, yeah, I'm just not doing that. Well, you've done all you can do. That's on me. I'm the one who's in the wrong now. Right.
Right.
And that's my heart that I need to work on. But the problem is in our society today, in families and at large, we just don't see a lot of forgiveness. And so we need to show our kids what forgiveness looks like. We need them to see that, because as an adult, if I'm going to be capable of forgiving other people, I need to see what that looks like. Because a lot of people think if I say I forgive you, that just means I pretend like it never happened. Well, that may not be the case. Forgiving someone doesn't mean there aren't still consequences, right? If my daughter breaks a lamp, I can forgive her, but that doesn't mean that all of a sudden the lamp is magically fixed and working again. There's still consequences. I've either got to be in the dark or I've got to buy another lamp. There's consequences. So forgiveness doesn't mean you just let people treat you crappy and it's just okay. That's not what And the other part of it is forgiveness isn't a one-time thing. A lot of times forgiveness is a process, because, if someone has wronged me and I say, it's okay, I forgive you, that doesn't mean that 2 weeks later I'm not going to be ticked off about it.
Right.
It may come back into my brain. What it does mean is I'm not going to treat you poorly because I'm still ticked off. What I'm going to do is ask God to help me not be so ticked off and to give me the strength to treat you well, even though I'm angry. That's part of the forgiveness process, right?
Exactly. And in the good book, it tells us to renew our minds. And I believe what one of the disciples asked him, how many times shall I forgive him? And I think it was like 9 times. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but Jesus was like, no, forgive 99 times or 77 times, one of those.
Yeah.
But it's something that we continuously going to be able to do. And I think forgiving someone, it helps release a stronghold that person could have on you, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
I always quote Maya Angelou. She said, there is no greater agony, meaning mental suffering than the bearing of an untold story inside of you. So that untold story could be unforgiveness, if that makes sense, man. I know for me, I carried some unforgiveness all the way into my adulthood. And believe me, it helped me not function properly. It helped me not bring forth the fruitful nature that God wanted me to for a long period of time. And it actually made me act out and contribute to me drinking and acting crazy at times. But yeah, so that forgiveness is very key. I truly believe that. And really, again, just having those conversations and just being open-minded to change, because
being willing to learn.
Yeah, exactly. And this comes to mind for me. So we got this kid that's looking, or you have this parent, this teacher, this coach that's looking at you right now. They're taking tons of value, but they have this black kid or whatever the case may be, or whatever the young male is, and he's just like, why should I continue? Why should I continue, Joel, with life, with everything that's going on where, I'm sad, I'm frustrated. Why should I continue? Again, going back to your life is a reflection of the stories that you tell yourself. I truly believe that. Do you have any tips and techniques of providing why should I continue, answering that question for a young male?
Yeah, so there's a couple things that come to mind, and I'm a pretty big nerd when it comes to literature. So I love The Lord of the Rings. That's like my favorite book of all time. I've read it every year for the past 20 years. And there's a quote in there where Tolkien says, "Where there's life, there's hope." I love that, and I've heard other people put it this way: if you have a pulse, you have a purpose. And so the thing is, I believe that God doesn't allow us to go through things just for our own benefit or knowledge. I think he allows us to go through things so that we can help other people who are going to experience that same thing in the future. So that means if you're really struggling with something, if you've been dealing with anger, bitterness, frustration or whatever, exactly what you're doing right now, Chaz, with this show, because you've talked about how you had some anger and it caused you to do things you probably shouldn't have. And now what you're doing is taking that platform and using it to try to help other people. Well, that's exactly what I would tell someone in that situation. Listen, one, it can always get better. No matter how bad your life is, no matter how bad things are, there's always the potential that tomorrow will be better. And you have some degree of control over that. Now, obviously, there are things outside our control. But in general, there are certain things you can control, and let's work on those. right? Because you can make things a little bit better for yourself. But the other part of it is too, again, take what you are dealing with, take what you're going through, and learn to serve other people with it. I love what something you mentioned earlier about well, there's a quote from Maya Angelou. It reminded me of another quote where someone said, hanging on to bitterness or unforgiveness is like drinking poison and hoping the other person dies from it, right? Because you're the one hanging on to the bitterness, you're the one hanging on to the anger, and it's not affecting them at all. They're probably not thinking about you nearly as much as you think about them, right? They don't even care. But you're the one hanging on to it, so you're poisoning yourself, hoping it's going to hurt them, and it's just not going to happen that way, right? So what we've got to do is we've got to, instead of hanging on to that bitterness, let's turn it around and say, okay, what have I learned from this? How can I help someone else? Because I guarantee you, whatever it is you're dealing with, you're not the only one. I would argue that's one of the biggest lies that the devil tells us, is that you're the only person who's ever dealt with, and then fill in the blank. And because if he can get you to feel like you're isolated, then you're really susceptible to a lot of bad things, right? If you know you have some support around you, you're a lot stronger, right? The Bible talks about how a cord of 3 strands is not easily broken. Well, that's because you got support, right? So those are some things that I would tell them. One, where there's life, there's hope. Okay, where there's life, there's hope. It can always get better. And what you're dealing with is going to one day allow you to help someone else who is where you are right now. You will move on past this. Things will get better. And then you can turn around and help somebody else, right? So imagine that you've been, you get caught in a flash flood and you're being kind of swept downstream. You are struggling, but you manage to get to the side and grab hold of something. And you see someone else coming downstream. Now you're equipped to reach out and help them. And they can reach out and help somebody else, right? And so it's not just about you. It is about you. But now that you've gotten some help, we got to pay it forward. We got to turn around and help other people, right? And I know a lot of coaches talk about that with their players and teachers, with their students, whatever. But that's what child rearing is all about. It's about paying it forward. It's about trying to help our kids become even better people than we are, and enjoy life even more than we do, and have opportunities that maybe we didn't have, right? That's what we as parents want. We want our kids to have it better than we have it, right? Well, that's what we ought to be trying to do, is just help other people. And so whatever you're dealing with, whatever you're struggling with, think how powerful you're going to be in the future and how much you're going to be able to help people, because the more you've dealt with, the stronger you're going to be, the more people you can then help coming forward.
Powerful, powerful, powerful. Dude, you nailed it. You gave so much value there. That is so inspiring and so on point, if that makes sense. Your story is developed to impact lives. I truly believe that. And as you, like you said, as you have your life experiences, you're going to be able to reach back and grab that next person, because you're going to be able to go, everything that I've been through, I'm able to relate to that individual that's going through something similar, and maybe I can be able to share something to kind of help prevent them from going through that full storm that I went through. And even if they did go through that storm, how I overcame that, I can be able to show them how to overcome. And I feel like that's the journey that you and I, we can relate on, is empowering people to overcome all their struggles, all their feelings, beliefs, and opinions that is holding them strong, holding them down. And I'm truly blessed to be in your presence, Joel. You're a phenomenal individual. I know God has amazing plan moving forward for you. I know you accomplished so much, but I know that there's so many more books, there's so many more ebooks, conferences, meetings, interviews, that you're going to be able to shine a light on your audience and be able to help bring, light to the blindness that this world is seeing. And I truly believe that begins with having conversations and educating ourselves. And you're definitely proven to me in the short period that I've known you that that's the path that you're on. And I'm just proud to be able to say that I'm on that same path with you, and I want to continue to grow with you, brother. And I know someone here is watching this that took a lot from you. They're like, man, how can I get in contact with Joel to be able to, continue this relationship, to be able to learn more about what he does? Can you share your contact information with the audience?
Yeah, listen, it's Chaz. It's been entirely my pleasure, man. It's been a blessing and a privilege to be on your show. I appreciate your kindness and your generosity and letting me be able to share some of this stuff. And again, the work that you're doing is impacting people, and I'm just glad to be a part of it. So thank you again for having me on. It's been absolutely my privilege. But yeah, listen, I would love to connect with any of your audience that wants to reach out. The easiest way to get a hold of me is find me on social media. It's Joel W. Hawbaker. That last name is Hawbaker. Joel W. Hawbaker. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram. I'm on all those places with the same name. You can also come to my website. It's joelwhawbaker.com. And there's an email Joel form on there. Again, I would love to send me a message on social media, send me a message on my website, whatever's easiest for you. You can also go to reallifeleading.com, and there's a contact Joel form, but that's where you'll find all of my interviews. You'll find all my blended family information, that kind of stuff as well. And again, any of your audience, look, if you want to talk sports, then we'll talk sports. If you want to talk blended families, we'll talk blended families. Whatever you want to talk about, I would love to have these conversations. And I would love to not just talk, but I'd love to listen. That's one of the things that I'm really trying to learn how to do better. Because if you ask my wife or my students or my daughters, they'll tell you, Dad's real good at talking. He's learning how to be better at listening. So I appreciate you giving me the chance to do a little bit of both tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, most definitely. And I know we're going to get together. We're going to talk sports, man. I'm a big sports guy myself. So we got a lot more conversations to come, Joe, man. But again, I appreciate you. And
Yeah.
yes, thank you for your time, brother.
Yeah, thank you very much. It really has been a pleasure.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And I'm going to go ahead and kind of lead us out on this. I want each and every one of you, yes, if you're watching replay, definitely reach out to me or Joel. If we can help assist you, serve you, give value to you, you can reach me at chazjacksonspeaks.org or even on here on Facebook. I want to learn about you and how I can serve you. And I want each and every one of you to stay plugged in. This video, as well as other previous ones, a lot of value has been poured out here. And I want each and every one of you to stay up with GNG. More of these live streams are coming soon, podcast. And I want each and every one of you to remember this and take this to heart. I want you to keep those crowns on your hearts. And also remember this one thing. We are God's echo. I love each and every one of you. Peace.